Welcome to Films and Stuff with your hosts, Pete Mitchell and Ethan Hunt.
Hey, Pete. Welcome back. Films and Stuff podcast. How are you today?
I am great, Ethan. How are you?
Everything is great. What is on our agenda today?
Forgive me for a minute, but I'm going to nerd out. Everyone roll for initiative. Heyo. That's an inside joke for us D&D nerds. Today we're talking about the Dungeons and Dragons movie.
D&D.
Honor Amongst Thieves.
Honor Amongst Thieves. Is it amongst, the British amongst, or it's the U.S. among?
Oh, it's the U.S. among. Damn you.
There's an amongst us. Okay.
Yes.
Anyway, for listeners, Pete is definitely the bigger D&D fan / player than I am, although somehow I missed out on this critical piece of entertainment in my childhood because personality-wise, I probably would have been a very good D&D player. It seems like something I should have gotten into.
I'm going to get you there. You wait and watch. I will get you there.
I will wait and watch. And further complicating things is that due to the Ramadan holiday in Dubai, D&D is not yet released. They're waiting for the holiday weekend upcoming. So Pete, for the second film in a row, has gotten the jump on me and has gotten to see it. But I'm going to indulge him. We're going to have spoilers. I'm just going to have to suffer because we want everyone to be able to hear what his take is on it. Pete, I have nothing to contribute. Everything's on your shoulders for this.
You don't need to worry about spoilers per se, because in terms of plot, it's a very generic plot. Let me start by setting the scene like we always do.
Yeah.
I saw the movie last night, 7:45 show, prime time, central London, not even my local
Friday
cinema.
night. Yeah.
Because unlike other movies, this one in particular, I really wanted to see what the audience reaction was going to be and what the audience composition was going to be, way more than any of the other movies we watch. Because when it comes to, gaming properties, whether it's a video game or a tabletop game or a board game or a card game, it has always been a niche game. Niche to the point where people who kind of play it used to be, although that's not the case anymore, ostracized in society, right? It was always like, oh, you're the nerd who plays D&D. And then they had the satanic panic of the 80s, right? Where they were worried that people who played D&D were doing satanic rituals. All nonsense, obviously. But regardless, it's always been seen as like the black sheep of the gaming cosmos. Until recently, I would say in the last 5 years or so, D&D's popularity has soared. Soared to the point where if you are a group of 5 or 6 players and you stream your campaigns on Twitch or YouTube, you're making hundreds of thousands of dollars, if not millions of dollars, right?
Why are you not streaming?
I don't have a group that would be camera friendly.
Zinger.
Yeah. Critical Role, most famously, and Dimension 20, two of the biggest, well, I would argue two of the bigger ones, maybe not the biggest. They're famous. They have, Critical Role has parlayed their success online to having their own Netflix TV series out.
Whoa.
They've become a canon part of the Wizards of the Coast. They're very popular and they're making millions of dollars off of their merch and off of their video series. So it's no longer, in my opinion, no longer a niche part of the gaming industry. But in any case, overall, Dungeons and Dragons in particular for the mainstream audience, still relatively niche.
Okay.
So 7:45 Friday night, packed audience.
Really?
Packed audience. The cinema must have had 200 seats and every seat was filled to the
You are
brim.
kidding me.
Packed. Not at all what I expected. And I would gather that out of the 150, 200 people that were there, 80 to 90% of them D&D players or D&D fans.
What's the male to female breakdown?
Relatively even yesterday.
Hmm.
I thought it would be more male dominated, but it wasn't.
Yep.
It was actually quite good. And more interestingly, a lot of the people who went came in large groups.
Hmm.
So it wasn't like a guy and a guy or a guy and a girl or two girls. No, it was like a group of 7 or 8 people all sitting together.
Hmm.
It got me thinking that there's got to be more than one group of people who play D&D together who are watching the movie together as well.
Yeah.
Which I thought was really nice, and
Yeah, that's cool.
we just did an episode with our friends at the Underrated podcast, Derek and Ariel.
Yep.
And they play D&D. And I think they're planning on going as together with a bunch of their other D&D friends who play together. And I think that's where a lot of the charm and appeal is going to come for these guys as well, which is to be able to go with people who enjoy the same hobbies as you.
Right.
Yeah, I was pleasantly surprised. I thought that was very good. Moving on, the premise is ultimately that the movie is a heist movie where you have a makeshift group and they have to try to steal something back that was taken away from them.
Okay.
It is in a lot of ways like Guardians of the Galaxy. Misfit group of adventurers who are not just getting to know each other, but also trying to work together as a team.
So Chris Pine is Chris Pratt of Guardians, the handsome, swarmy leader of the group, right?
Yeah, who maybe isn't the most technically capable of the group, who isn't the smartest of the group, who doesn't add anything in terms of skills to the group.
Yeah.
But he is the one who's, the most charismatic. He's the one that everyone rallies behind as the natural leader.
He's got balls, right?
Yeah. And that makes sense because not just in a character trope, but as a class in D&D, he plays a bard. Bards are famous for being highly charismatic people who are able to unite groups together.
Can I make a comment now?
Yeah.
You just said the word bard. I have no idea what that meant until you kind of explained it. I'll say it's like a bishop or a knight or a rook in chess. It's a thing.
It's a thing.
Do I need to know these things before I go to the movie? Or am I going to be like, I have no idea what's going on? Or will I just kind of figure it out?
No. So you don't need to know anything. And that's actually, I think, one of the strongest points of this movie is you don't need to know. As a fan, I understand what everyone's role in the movie is. Chris Pine plays a bard. That's the character class that he would be playing in the real world game. Michelle Rodriguez plays the barbarian. Justice Smith plays the sorcerer. There's another character who plays the druid. And then you've got Jean Rege Paul. I can't remember. The guy from Bridgerton, the very handsome guy from Bridgerton. He plays the paladin. But again, you don't need to know that. That's inside baseball knowledge for us. So ultimately, it's a heist movie with a gang of misfit adventurers who get together. And because we've kind of seen this before in Guardians and in other movies, a lot of the plot elements that unfold in front of you are relatively predictable. So we can kind of see that. I don't want to really go into spoilers for 2 reasons. One, there aren't that many things to spoil. Any seasoned movie watcher, even if you don't know anything about D&D, if and when you watch this movie, I'm almost certain you'll be able to predict what happens by the end of the movie.
Okay.
Because they lay it on a bit thick and it's kind of obvious and it's all kind of tropes we've seen before. That's not a bad thing. In fact, I think that's probably helpful for this movie. And the reason I say that is because you're already introducing an element of out there-ness with D&D overall that's so niche that you don't want to start also throwing in plot expectations, subversions, that kind of thing. You kind of just want to play the safe road because this is the 4th movie in the D&D franchise, but none of the previous movies have been successful. They've all been critically panned. They've all been terrible flops. This one has the best chance of succeeding.
Let me ask a few questions, if you don't mind. Is the comedic element or the action element more prevalent in this movie?
Comedic for me. I thought the comedy was better than the action, but the action was also pretty decent.
Okay. And is this set up for a sequel? Or is it possible that there's a sequel in D&D?
Yes. I think that there's not a sequel, but I think this is definitely a franchise.
Okay.
They can definitely do a sequel to this.
Yeah.
But what this movie did really well, and I'm glad you asked that question, what this movie did really well is that they had amazing visual effects, amazing sound design. The creature design, by the way, was chef's kiss. As someone who's played D&D, but it's kind of like theater of the mind, you're describing creatures to your friends. This is exactly what you kind of wanted to see. It's almost as if they reached into your mind and pulled out the description and showed it on screen. It was really gorgeous. But what I think the best thing they did was they built the world. They introduced this world and the set design so well that I'm pretty sure they could easily reuse it for future movies. So they've established now not just the concept of D&D in the movies, but the world in which this movie takes place.
So as someone who, we've seen this kind of with DC and Marvel, someone is a comic book fan and they go to see the movie and they're like, whoa, not at all faithful representation. I'm very upset with how they depicted this person or this character or this event. What's your feeling when you walked out of the cinema? You're like, okay, that was pretty good. Or you're like, they really disrespected this thing.
No. So I think they were very respectful of the lore. They took good care of it. The characters that we see in this movie are unique to this movie. They're not unique to D&D.
Okay.
And that's the beauty of D&D. D&D is basically just a sandbox with the world and a set of rules. You make your own characters to do whatever you want in that sandbox and those rules. That is why I think this movie was made in such a way that if you wanted to make more movies with different stars, you could. Although this group of stars got along relatively well together. I thought the chemistry between everyone, in particular between Chris Pine and Michelle Rodriguez, was really good.
Kind of nice to see Michelle Rodriguez in something else, huh?
Yes, that's not a franchise film.
Yeah. What's her name in Fast and Furious? Letty.
Yeah.
Letty, right? We've seen her in that role for so many years. I can't even think of what else I've seen her in, to be honest, right? We've kind of forgotten that she's a good actress and not just someone who can drive a car with Gino Toretta, like helping her narrowly escape.
I don't want to say she's become typecast, but she's kind of been typecast a little bit as like a gruff and very physically capable actor. Unfortunately, this movie doesn't do anything to change that perception because she's playing a barbarian. She solves problems with her fists in this movie. In that regard, I don't think this movie is changing that view or that stereotype view of her.
Yeah.
But I still think she was excellent in this movie. It is a new character, and it could just be another franchise for her if they want her to be in it. And more importantly, if she wants to be in it. Long story short, all in all, I thought this was really good, but there are some problems I have with it.
Okay, let's hear them.
One of the biggest problems I have is that I think that because it's still relatively niche in the grand scheme of Hollywood and movies, I wonder what the audience reaction is going to be outside of people who are fans of D&D. I think that the scores from D&D fans will be much higher than they would be on average. And I also wonder if that will have a knock-on effect to box office because one, I've seen the movie. I have no desire to see it again. I think that this movie, for example, would 100% fail the mom test because I don't think any mom is going to want to see this kind of movie.
Yeah.
And I think there are other fantasy trope movies that are better than this, right? If you're looking at this as a genre of fantasy versus a video game, or sorry, a game adaptation, Lord of the Rings, and then on TV, we're starting to see more like Game of Thrones and maybe Rings of Power and Wheel of Time. There's lots of different alternatives in the fantasy genre. I'm skeptical about how well this movie is going to do beyond the first week, maybe the second week at best.
Yeah.
And I also think that D&D is very much more popular in North America, maybe some parts of Western Europe, more than anywhere else.
Yeah.
That's not to say people do not play D&D in Japan or in Australia or wherever, but I think the sheer volume of players is concentrated in North America and maybe Western Europe.
Yeah, I think you're right.
So I think that it's going to have a really hard time convincing audiences in Dubai, in India, in China to go out there and watch this, because when they see it, they're going to be comparing it to fantasy movies. They're not going to understand the D&D tropes.
Yeah. I would imagine that there's a niche community in Germany, for example, that's very into it.
Yeah.
But by and large, Germany, Spain, France, kind of those, Italy, they're not going to be excited about it. You know, I would
doubt.
expect nothing comes from Asia. When I say nothing, I mean, relatively speaking, right? It's just not like, my perception is not that it's super popular there.
I mean, I can give you the perfect example. I went with a friend of mine who's never played D&D and has always made fun of me for playing D&D.
Yeah. What kind of friend is that?
He and I sat down, we watched the movie, and when we walked out, he said, okay, look, there were a couple of funny moments in there. Certainly there were a couple of moments in there that made me laugh. But in our review, for him, this was a skip. He did not enjoy himself. He jokingly told me, your movie picking privileges are revoked.
Ooh.
That's how badly he thought of this movie.
So if this movie, in your opinion, if this movie was not called Dungeons and Dragons, it was just called Honor Amongst Thieves, and you saw it, what would you think?
I would give it the same rating, because I think as someone who knows D&D, there were a couple of things that we can get extra added value from.
Yeah.
But in general, I don't think that it would have fundamentally changed my view on the movie. I mean, I'll say it right now. For me, this movie is very much a wait for streaming. I think that for a small percentage of the audience, this is going to be a must watch in cinema because they're D&D hardcore. Right. They love the game. They love the world, all of that. And I do. But I also recognize that I'm a very small percentage of the audience. I think that for a much larger percentage of the audience, though, it's going to be I don't understand what's going on here. I don't understand what the Underdark is. I don't understand why there's dragons. Why does that person look like a lizard? Why does that person look so small? All those small things that we understand as A, video game fans, or B, as gamers, we can kind of square away, but your average person is not going to be able to square that away.
You and I have reviewed Halo, and we've reviewed The Last of Us. Do you think D&D would be better as a series? Do you think it would have been better that if Amazon Prime took it and said, you know what, we're taking the rights to D&D, we're going to make it a series?
Probably. But again, I think the beauty of D&D is that it comes down to the story.
Yeah.
Again, D&D is just a sandbox with a set of rules. I think that you could have, as long as the story was compelling, I think it's irrelevant whether it's a movie or a TV series. Because a TV series, again, you always have the advantage of time. You can kind of expound on things a lot more. You could probably explain a lot of D&D more. But as a story overall, this isn't that bad. It was just a little bit of a tropey, cliched movie in terms of storyline. The storyline wasn't bad at all. And if I'm going to base it just on the storyline, again, this is the same for me. I'd say it's a wait for streaming. I had very much higher hopes for this. It was funnier than I expected it to be. But I also recognize that some of that humor comes down to the fact that I know a little bit more than your average audience member is going to know about D&D.
Yeah.
So some of the jokes that are in there, some of the Easter eggs that are in there, I don't expect everyone to get. I really think this has the potential for a franchise, but I think that'll come down to, does this movie make $50 million or $100 million this weekend? I don't know.
I don't know either.
I don't see it. I really don't see them making $100 million this weekend in North America. If it makes half that, I think that'll be a great success. And I certainly don't think the worldwide gross is going to be anywhere near that.
So apart from D&D, what are we watching next?
So we've got, in terms of video game movies, or at least in terms of gaming movies, Tetris just dropped yesterday as the time of this recording on Apple TV Plus.
Yes.
And that, from what I understand, is a biopic.
I have watched Tetris while you were busy gallivanting to your local London cinema. I was forced to find something to compensate for that. I watched Tetris on Apple TV Plus. It stars the same dude who is in Blackbird.
Taron Egerton.
Taron Egerton. I have to say, I really, really enjoyed the movie. I think everybody universally knows the game Tetris. Now there's like so many kind of copycat Tetrises, right? You can't do anything on Apple or a Samsung device without finding, you know, like a game recommendation kind of inspired by Tetris. But this is about the original Tetris. I'm not going to spoil it for you or for anybody, but it was... Taron plays a dude named Henk, not Hank, which is an American name, Henk, because he's Dutch. And he is kind of a computer programmer, game designer, but he also has a business where he finds games and tries to distribute them, right? I mean, this is the 80s, right? Atari, Nintendo, game consoling was big back then. He's introduced to Tetris and loves it immediately, tries to secure the rights. And then the movie basically goes on about how the rights are given, because it was developed by a Russian government worker. So, of course, in the old pre-Berlin Wall communism, the developer didn't actually own their rights. It was owned by the state of Russia. Russia obviously had different ways of looking at what ownership permits and how you license things. And then, of course, there's bureaucracy with different people believing different organizations should be entitled to the rights. There's bidding wars. There's corporate drama in the background as well. And it shows, you know, basically how the game was licensed by Taron and his group and eventually, you know, distributed on such a literally worldwide basis. It's pretty good. I have to say it's absolutely worth watching. Not too long, probably comes in at just under 2 hours. Quite enjoyable. I have nothing but very, very good things to say. Taron plays the role well. He's not really intended to be the main focus of this. It's really about the story and about the game. You know, that's kind of the protagonist or the main character. So I think he plays that role right. You know, he's not trying to be larger than life. He's not trying to be this ultra sympathetic figure. He plays the role, you know, with the understatement that it probably requires. So it doesn't detract from the story. He's got his own drama going on in life. It's not clear how much of that's true or not true, but I have to say, overall, it's a very good movie. I was waiting for it to come out for a long time. You know, it's been promoted and highlighted on Apple TV Plus, you know, for at least several weeks now. I was really looking forward to it. And I think the best thing you can say is that it did not disappoint. It's really frustrating when you're looking forward to something coming out. You're like, all right. I mean, in my case, it was Friday night, end of the week, finally time to sit down with, you know, a bowl of popcorn and chill out. If you're really looking forward to watching something and it's a dud, that's like really a sinking feeling, you know? You're like, man, I was looking forward to this. I can't even get through 30 minutes of this. This is terrible. Not the case with Tetris. Tetris, I had really high expectations. It hit those expectations. So it's definitely something I think everyone should watch. You should definitely watch it. I'm not going to say more and spoil more about it, but it's quite a good effort.
Oh, I'm looking forward to it. I'll be watching it tonight.
And apart from that, the other stuff we have to watch is we're watching Succession as it comes out. We're watching Mandalorian as it comes out. Is there anything else in cinema or on streaming that we need to be keeping an eye on?
Yep. So next week, we've got Air coming out.
Oh, yeah.
Which is another biopic about
Michael Jordan.
Well, so it's not a biopic on Michael Jordan, but it's a biopic on Michael Jordan and Nike specifically. Yeah. And we've got the Super Mario Brothers movie coming out.
Oh, you're super excited for this.
I am. So it's animated. It's another video game movie, or at least it's another game adaptation.
Yeah.
I was under the impression that Renfield is coming out next week as well.
You're busy.
Yeah, it'll be a little bit busy next week.
I don't know about Renfield. I've got to check it out and see.
The trailer looks really good. I mean, my main man, Nicolas Cage as Dracula.
What does the name Renfield mean in the movie Renfield?
Oh, that's his assistant's name.
I sincerely did not know that.
This movie is basically a Dracula movie as told through the eyes of Renfield, not through the eyes of Dracula. It looks like it's a great comedy. I haven't read any early reviews. I don't know if they're even out yet, but it looks like it's going to be good fun.
And then we'll get another episode of Succession this week, and we'll get another episode of Mandalorian, right?
And Ted Lasso.
Oh, not watching Lasso. Should I be?
It's the final season. It looks like it could be better than season 2. Season 2 wasn't bad, but I thought it was a little bit of a letdown. I think season 1 was just stellar.
Yeah, season 1 was so good that it set the expectations like can't meet them, you know?
Yeah, it's that. I think that was the thing. So season 3 so far seems to be pretty good.
Okay, Pete, that is our weekly take for films and stuff.
Are you a D&D fan and did this movie make sense for you? Are you not a D&D fan and did this movie not make sense to you? Tell us more. Leave a comment below this video. Tweet at us at F&S Podcast or drop us a DM on Instagram at Films and Stuff Podcast or email us aloha at filmsandstuffpodcast.com.
Aloha means hello. Pete, it's been a pleasure. We knocked out some really great takes today. Thanks for your time and for shouldering the load for the D&D update.
I do the hard work so you don't have to.
That's right. Thanks, everyone, for tuning in. Thanks, Pete.
Everyone.
Bye now.
Thank you for listening to another episode of Films and Stuff. If you haven't already, please subscribe and review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever podcasts are downloaded. Films and Stuff. There is no substitute.